This workshop is building on the last workshop of Spotted Bear in 2016. And so after that workshop, we had some discussion groups with great discussions there, basically asking this question, was it harder then or now? And what are some of the challenges and what contributes to success and how's it changed over the years? And so Carol and I spent some time going through the notes after that, and I thought I would just very briefly hit on some of the highlights just to keep feeding this conversation here. So when we think about wilderness fire, these are some of the kind of phrases that come to mind that people hear. I don't know if you can see those actually, but natural and wild, place for students of fire ecology, we've heard that today, resilient ecosystems, fire adapted plants and animals, this short-term versus long-term risk, especially near communities, future generations, it's an ecological imperative, and so those are things that just keep coming up related to wilderness fire. And like Carol was saying, in the Northern Rockies, we have some large landscapes with room to learn about fire. And we're really lucky that way, right? In fact, we're kind of, proud of what we have here in the West that we all are so passionate about. But really, we have Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex, but we also have Glacier National Park, which has had a ton of fire. Maybe hasn't necessarily been managed in the same way, but there's a lot of fire on the landscape. Selway Bitterroot and Frank Church River of No Return, Yellowstone National Park. So we just have a lot of places to learn about wilderness within these, about fire within these large landscapes. And so the effort that I've been involved in really started back in 2014, and Carol and Dave Campbell organized a field trip to the Selway Bitterroot that was in conjunction with the large wildland fire conference in Missoula that year. And really going down, and just like you see this map here of the Bob, you also see a map with a lot of fire in the landscape down there, and a lot of that's been very intentionally managed. And so there was a field trip and this lunchtime conversation. A couple of those people are here in the room saying, gosh, we just really need to keep this conversation going. There are a lot of challenges still. And so as a result of that, the Northern Rockies Fire Science Network was asked to spend some time delving into the topic. And so one of the things that we did was interview a lot of the wilderness fire champions from the Northern Rockies. And as you're all aware, a bunch of them have retired, so it really is like Carol ended her talk with, it's you, it's me, it's all of us now. And so, so we did 30 interviews with folks from the Northern Rockies that had substantial experience managing wilderness fire. And here are the list of names. Here you have Dave Campbell and Stu Hoy, and then there's Bill, our same videographer, Bill Munoz, who didn't introduce himself this morning, who was with us all the way, so it only made sense to have him come back today. So we had the first workshop, as I talked about, and it was really melding. It was great. We had this whole range from a bunch of undergrad fire ecology students that were brought along by a professor because it was the only way he could speak, and then we had Dave Bunnell and George London giving talks, and we had the current fire managers, who was Deb Mucklow at the time, and Mike Munoz. And so it was just this great melding of the ages and experience levels. And there were 9 videos produced of the talks, and they're on our website, nrfirescience.org. If you go to past events, you can get to the page. And one of the things that was shown at that, here you see this amazing map of the Bob today with the fire history, but really you guys started out by showing us the fire history, from 1930 to 1983, and there's a substantial difference between that landscape and this landscape, and that's for a variety of reasons, some related to us and some not. But so in talking to these champions and retired, especially, we heard lots of stories about the early days and what were some of the challenges then and how was it different and what do we have now maybe that we didn't have then. So this is just a few of the early fires and successes. And so Carol and I looked through the notes and we were asking people, was it easier then or is it easier now? Was it harder then or is it harder now? And you can't ignore the fact that it was cooler then, right? That's part of why that map was like that. So maybe it was easier then because it was cooler. But on the other hand, Dave Bennell gave a very impassioned and enlightening talk at that workshop about the culture and what they had to do at that time in order to allow to not jump on a fire and put it out as soon as it was ignited in the wilderness. And so I just love it. This quote from Dave Bennell, that was just such an outlandish proposal to allow natural process of fire to burn in wilderness. Outlandish. Well, we don't feel that way today, right? That it just absolutely exceeded the culture within our agency to accept that. And I know when I was talking to Orville Daniels during one of our interviews, he talked about, even though he had gone to Washington, D.C. and made a fire plan and done all this work to promote the concept of allowing fire to play its natural role, he was there on the first fire and he felt in his gut like he should be putting it out. So his brain and his gut weren't even matching based on his history and his training. So there were some challenges then that are different than what we have now. One of the things that we came in, and Carol, I love how you ended on that note, but that's one of the things that we keep seeing over and over is that it wouldn't happen without the early champions. And in fact, we even came up on, we haven't gotten all the details, but we came up, look at this picture. There were agendaless meetings, because if there's no agenda, then you can't be told not to go, right? And so this was, there was, and this group, a few of these people went around the country when there were problems and tried to help solve those problems related to how can we make this happen. And so as we go through these time periods kind of moving forward, we can't not talk about 1988. And we had Yellowstone Fire. I actually wish that I had put up some pictures of Canyon Creek because that's a lot closer to where we are today. And some of the messages that came out from that time period is it was the first big fire, like big fire, public communication, right? Communication. I think those were some of the really big, I'm not speaking for myself, I'm speaking for what I've heard these interviewees say and from the discussion from the last one, but there were some real lessons to be learned in Canyon Creek too. Orville Daniels has told that story about we told everybody it would be okay and then we got caught by surprise with this big wind event. And so that was really a time where those were some of the issues. And then also just learning about the ecological recovery. It's not all devastated, and everybody in this room probably recognizes the beauty when you drive. I drove through a lot of fire on the way here today, and I'm sure some others did too. So realizing that everything didn't just die and that was it, right? We see all this green. Not only that, we see some amazing vistas that we wouldn't have seen, right? So it really, learning about the ecology. There's a fire that's not as well known. Tanya's published on this fire, but the Howling Fire in Glacier National Park in 1994. And what I want to use this one to talk about is just the resources needed to manage. It's hard to know what to call it, whether you want to manage for fire use or resource benefit or prescribed natural fire. But in 1994, there were no resources in Glacier National Park in order to manage this fire. And it was actually, and so you talked to Mark Finney from the Fire Lab, who modeled fire behavior for it with some new tools to help the park superintendent, who was also new, understand how those fires might burn. So that's another thing we didn't have in the past, was the ability to forecast. Not like it's perfect today, but we didn't have the ability to forecast even to the extent that we do today, where that fire might go. And so those tools, that was the first time some of those tools were used, and it was absolutely critical in making an argument. And then actually another thing that Mark Finney talks about is that this was a high fire year. Storm King, right? I mean, this was a big fire year, and nationally there were not resources. But this particular fire with the climate, the microclimate right where it was, people almost put it out by walking around it. So they had to tell people, like, don't keep going over and looking at it. Not the public, only the managers. But the other thing that this fire really did was, it turned out that some park service manager from Boise needed to come down and help the park, because there were no other resources besides the park's resources, and they weren't enough to manage this fire. They had other fires going on as well. And so there was this recognition after the Hauling fire that we need people dedicated to managing fire and not just suppressing it. We need people who understand how to do that. And some of the things that we heard, even in the interviews, were about patience and waiting, not just approaching. And so that fire led to the development of dedicated fire use teams and fire use modules. So it's a really neat one not to forget. So then we keep moving forward, and so great, prescribed natural fire, we're kind of figuring out a little bit about how to do that. We're allowing it in some places, despite that gut feeling that we're not sure. It's in my head that I know it's good. And then comes 2000. So Serra Grande, the Bitterroot fires, and Serra Grande really led to a whole pullback on allowing any prescribed natural fire. And then the Bitterroot fires actually led to this big pulse of resources. And I was in the room where the Chief of Forest Service at the time was telling the leadership team, we have this very short window to get some more resources funded. And so we did, and out of that came the National Fire Plan and a whole bunch of new positions. We also, after 1994, there was a new wildland fire policy, and then there were updates in 2001, 2003 that, there were two different kinds of fire. There was acknowledgement of that. We can manage for fire use. And we even had a fire use program with, incentives and recognition. And so that was kind of, it was an intense time because we're still we're still seeing big fire that we're not used to, but at the same time, we're starting to develop some increased capacity, some risk analysis tools, figuring out how to integrate the ability to manage fire into our land management planning. And then our last the way we decided to group this was from 2009 to present, because in 2009 there was an implementation guidance to clarify that fire policy, really you don't have to have either a suppression fire or a fire use fire, but you can use the objectives and strategies and tactics that make sense on different parts of different fires. And you probably can't see this picture very well, but here's Missoula in 2017, and it's just such a classic. I mean, here we are in the Northern Rockies, all these fires around Missoula at the same time, from the valley and the Louie up to the wilderness. And so it really, just shows that you have different areas where you can have different objectives, at least in theory. Maybe not, we might still have a ways to go in terms of how we communicate those. But so really recognizing that in this period, we have evidence of warmer climate now, fires are changing, but we also have these mosaics that we're starting to see and the reburns that Mike was talking about, lots and lots of urban interface, and also sometimes I would say we don't even have a choice, right, about managing natural fire outside of wilderness. So the question is, was it harder then or now? There are all these factors over the years that have changed. And so we came to the conclusion, yes, it was harder then and it's harder now, but just for different reasons. And so really, now we've got this warmer climate, bigger fire, and then, I know I haven't mentioned it yet, but just everybody in the room knows this huge administrative burden as we're doing more with less. We all have to do our own, time and travel and accounting, and fire seasons are longer, so people are tired. So there are some real challenges now, but we can't ignore the fact that it wasn't easy for those guys. And if you listen to that video on our website of Dave Bennell talking, it wasn't easy. And there were a lot of obstacles to go around, and creative people figuring out how to get around those obstacles because, like Carol said, there's just this passion, that it was the right thing to do. There was that lack of science and technology and forecasting and predictive capabilities, lack of skills for how do you manage a fire that you're not just jumping on and suppressing, because we got pretty good at that. So, yes. Just some of my reflections from sitting through all those interviews is this personal commitment piece. It just comes up again and again that it was hard, and the people that did it, and it is hard, and the people that do it because of passion and commitment and a sense of responsibility for managing the land. The other piece is that, we celebrate these mosaics now, but if Mike retires and somebody else comes in, or if Deb had retired from Spotted Bear and Scott didn't come in, or Jim hadn't gotten the FMO job, there's a short window that we lose what we gained. And some of the research that maybe Carol will talk about by Sean Parks, 15 years, we've seen it this year, or last year in Glacier, hot fires burning in a 15-year-old footprint. So, if we decided to just jump on all the fires going forward, we would lose this mosaic in just a couple of decades. We're still working on accepting long-duration fire, not only, at the edge of wilderness, but also outside wilderness. And I'm looking forward to Erin's talk about objectives later on today, kind of delving into what are some of the objectives that, stated and unstated, even behind fire management decisions. So we still have a ways to go, as has been said this morning. I just kind of want to end on this note that Dave Campbell, in this picture in 2014, I think it was, we were in the field down in the Bitterroot, and he kept talking about a religion. And so I took opportunity when I was interviewing Orville Daniels of saying, what do you mean? Like, why does he keep calling it a religion? And Orville laughed, as Orville, in his way, and he said, it's a belief system. It's a belief system and an attitude about nature and the role that fire plays in nature. So when people pick up the ideology that fire is a natural example that has beneficial effects, then it leads you into all kinds of actions. That's just like a religion, he says, and religion is an ideology. And so we do have a lot of champions that have retired, but they all make it clear that they are available to help. So if someone's in a new position now and they're a little bit uncertain, it's not necessarily a reason to be risk averse, because there are people currently on the payroll and outside the payroll as well. And then there are people that have just decades of experience figuring out how to do this and figuring out how to address those challenges. And so, it's okay to ask for help.